Welcome to the Marketing Made Simple podcast with me, your host, Len Foster. And in this episode, I want to talk to you about a different way to position yourself as the perfect candidate for your dream job, what I call the ultimate job interview plan. To do this, I want to tell you a story. It's about a guy, it's way in my past now, but a guy that sold himself into a great job using a sales technique called UPB. Now I'll explain fully what a UPB is in a minute. But first, let's just start at the beginning. Now, in my opinion, it's always worth taking the time to think about what someone wants to buy and why they want to buy it, because there may be more than one way to sell it to them. And what I mean is this: when you know someone wants what you have, how you present it can mean the difference between success and failure. Now, I once had a situation when I was a contracts manager in the construction industry, like I said, quite a few years ago, where a colleague was being made redundant. My colleague was a site manager on an apartment block we were building. Now, he came to me one afternoon and said he'd got several companies to send his CV to, which he was going to do in the next couple of days. It was how to go about the next bit that he was unsure of, and the next bit being the actual job interview. I asked him what he thought he should do. He said, well, he'd go to the interviews, take a copy of his CV, and then go through it with them to explain his experience. And then, if they had any questions, he would answer them. My question to him was simply this: do you think that's what the other candidates will do as well? His reply was, yeah, I suppose so. So I asked, do you think your strategy will make you stand out from the other candidates? Not really, was his reply. So we came up with a new interview strategy. Now, the strategy was to use what's known as UPBs, which are unique perceived benefits. Now, this is what the employer thinks they're going to get from the candidate, which is different from let's say, a USP, unique selling point, which is what normally in sales the seller thinks is great about what they're selling. So in this instance, it would be what the candidate thinks is great about them. Now, I asked him to, overnight, come up with 5 absolute key elements that the site manager of the interviewer's dreams would have, and we'd meet up again the next day to discuss his findings. The next afternoon, we went through his 5 key elements and did a little polishing here and there to get to the final draft. I then asked him to, again, overnight, write down how he had these perfect site manager attributes and how he could easily demonstrate them. The following day, the interview plan started to come together. He now had a strategy to make himself stand out from the crowd, one that he understood, and a clear plan to execute it. How he would communicate his plan would make it easy for anyone to understand what he brought to the table, and how that made him different and, by the way, more employable. So we finally put the strategy plan together, and the next step was to practice, and practice some more. The delivery had to be confident and sold well. Now, I assured him that the interviewers had probably read his CV, so there was no value in him doing it again, as it would be boring and what everybody else would do. So I told him to introduce himself if required, then simply state, I assume you've read my CV, so I won't bother going over it again. What I'd like to do is briefly tell you what I believe to be the 5 key attributes of a successful site manager and demonstrate to you that I have them and how I will implement them to benefit your company. If you then have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. And the result was, this approach was extremely successful, and he got several calls to go back for further interviews and also several firm job offers as well. Being or doing something different can easily make you stand out from the crowd. Now, my colleague brought benefits and solutions to the table, not just features. His benefits were, this is what I can do for you, and his solutions were, these are the issues someone at my level will encounter, and here's how I'll solve them. This approach was way more successful than just focusing on features such as, this is how long I've been in the industry and this is my experience, etc., etc. My colleague focused the interviewers on how his skills would be employed in the present and the future, not the history of his past. Now, this story is an example of why I think a unique perceived benefit is way more powerful than a unique selling proposition, simply because it always identifies what the receiver wants most rather than what the seller thinks is best. If you're always working on what the receiver wants most, you'll never go far wrong when you're selling anything, and that includes you. Try this in your marketing. Let me know how you get on. Speak soon. Bye now.